The Little Devils by Kārlis. Once the two little devils who had spent their free time every day near the gates of hell and the fields of fire, doing all kinds of mischief, and had already tried to sneak out of hell just for a moment, saw that the guard had fallen asleep. At once the old urge came over them to see how the world looked, what was behind the gate, and about what the mother of the little devils had told them so much about. That is why they ran to the gate, and as they could not reach the key, one climbed on the shoulders of the other and unlocked the gate. With all their strength the two little devils slowly opened them, just a little, and slipped out. The gate's closing made quite the noise, from which the guard woke up, but as he did not notice anything, then he thought that the noise came from his dream. But through the long dark cave which connects hell and the world, the little devils were moving forward as quickly as their quick legs could carry them, and they did not stop running even when they were out of the cave and God's fine sun dazzled their eyes, who had only known darkness and hellfire. At last they were tired and fell into the shadow of the hill. They stayed there sleeping and resting. During that time their eyes got used to the light, and they started to look around and wonder at the brightness of the world. Oh, how everything was different here, and much, much nicer than hell. There, instead of the sky, was a black dome, and a large yellow, eternally long snake stretched itself on it and threw up fire, whose light horrifically lit up hell. Here the sky had such a lovely color that the little devils did not want to take their eyes off it, and instead of the snake there was such a brightness that they could not even look into it, and instead of the bluish red colored flames on which they had been used to walk was green, soft grass, and further away all kinds of flowers were shining and bending that they wanted to call to the watchers, "Come and pick us and stay with us." And both the little devils, to whom playing with fire had begun boring a long time ago, stood up and went into the field. They picked the nice flowers and tossed them at each other. They ran after butterflies and tore their wings off, as they were devious little devils, and did not know that they weren't supposed to do that. Listened to bird songs and went after them into the forest. In the forest they saw squirrels swiftly jumping from tree to tree, and they liked it so much that they asked if they could be their companions. The squirrels accepted, and now all of them were jumping from one tree branch to the next, and rejoiced till the sunset. Then the squirrels ate sugary spruce cones and went to sleep. Crawling under a thick spruce tree, they also wanted to sleep, but they could not fall asleep. They were accustomed to the heat in hell, now they were cold. When lastly a cold dewdrop fell on their naked bodies, they could not bear it any more. They stood up and asked the squirrels if they could lend them a pelt for the night. But the squirrels said that they were used to sleeping in their own pelts, and that is why they could not give in. Now the little devils had no choice but to leave the forest. They walked and ran, and finally found themselves in some master's home. As everyone here had already gone to sleep, the devils, unbothered, could find themselves the warmest place to sleep. The stove in the drying house would be the warmest, they talked, and went to the drying house, because the little fools did not know that the drying house's stoves were only heated in the autumn and the winter. Climbing into the hole, which, because old customs, was very deep, they found the stove not only as cold as the basement, but also full of buckets. In them was butter, because the houses did not have a basement. The mistress of the household had put the butter into the stove to save it from the heat. Both of the little devils became very angry, as they had put up their hopes for nothing. "Papa says," the first one was talking, "this master of the household is very smart. But why to build a stove just not to heat it? Why fill it with butter? Where we are from, no stove is cold, and Papa does not command to heat the stoves with butter." See, the devil had told mother about this master of the household. that he was very smart and very God-fearing, and it was impossible to get to his soul, because both of the little devils had heard that is why they knew to talk about the household master. "Let's do him some harm," the other one said. "Maybe we'll have some luck that Papa did not have. Here, next to the drying house, I saw a ditch with a bridge over it. Let's destroy it and put the butter in its place. The night is cold, moving around will keep us warm, and in the morning we will enjoy the anger of the household's master." "Let's do it," said the first, and they quickly destroyed the bridge, took the butter out of the drying house and dumped it into the ditch. When the mischief was done, and the little devils were starting to jump out of happiness, in front of the drying house they found a barrel full of tar. "How about we fill the buckets with tar and put them back into the stove?" the second devil, being the most devious, said, and once again started saying, "The household's master's loss and anger would be even greater, and so would our enjoyment." And they poured the tar into the buckets, and once again nicely and fairly placed them back into the stove. But they enjoyed this mischief so much that they decided to do more tricks. They caught a whole flock of bats, which were running on buildings, gathered glowing lightning bugs, and tied them to each of the ears of the bats, using spider webs. Then they led them into the drying house, in which they began to fly like birds with fiery eyes. But the little devils were not done just yet. "We have to do something to the household master himself," they thought. "Let's bring him to the barn and lay him in the bull's den." The little devils went into the barn and untied the bull, took him outside and tied him to the fence. Then they silently sneaked into the room, took the master from his bed, who overworked slept in hard sleep, and just as easily carried him to the barn and placed him in the straws of the bull's den. They took the bull into the house and threw it into the master's bed, where it calmly stayed sleeping. Now there was enough mischief done for the night. The little devils had warmed up from all the carrying, and because of it they wanted to take a ride on the pond, whose water shone in the moonlight. They took the bread trough as the boat and began to walk to the pond. When they had reached the middle of the yard, they saw two men in front of them coming through the gates. The little devils left their trough in the middle of the yard and fled into the nearby berry branches and looked at what the men would do. But those two were robbers, who intended to kill the master of the home to rob him. They went to the window, silently took it out and climbed into the room. Then one of them sneaked up to the household master's bed, for a moment listened to the imagined breathing of the farmer, and with a large dagger stabbed quite strongly into the bed, intending to strike the master's heart. But the dagger only scraped the bull's horn and slid down, damaging the bull's face. Screaming, the bull sprung out of the bed and began, head turning, to chase the robbers about the room. Scared to death, they barely managed to jump out of the window, where they, shivering out of fear, hid into the berry branches. "The farmer is a wizard! He has turned into a bull!" they whispered to one another, while the devils had to keep their hands on their mouths to suppress their laughter. In their room the bull raged for a little bit, and then went to sleep next to the furnace. The mistress of the household, who had slept in the other bed, had heard it all, but did not dare to even say a word, because she thought that the devil himself was romping around the room. She covered her face with a blanket and began to pray. When there was silence in the room, both of the robbers went out of the branches and into the barn. They wanted to steal the bull, because, in their thieves' sarcasm, they said two bulls in one household could not live in peace, so they would take one. But just as they opened the barn door, the farmer woke up. Astonished, he groped around in the straws and then called out, "Who's there? Where am I?" Hearing a person's voice from the bull's den, and unable to see in the dark, the robbers thought that the bull was talking, and shut the door, and ran into the drying house. Out of fear they wanted to hide in the stove, but just as the little devils they ran into the buckets. "This is crazy," said one. "A wizard must have had a spell put on him. It's a bliss that we ran into the drying house. Now we can eat butter to calm ourselves." They waited for a moment, and when everything was silent, they climbed out of the hole, took the trough from the yard and placed it next to the hole. They wanted to put butter in the trough so they could eat more easily. One robber climbed into the hole and began to lift the buckets out of the stove, placing them all around the hole. The other, wanting to put the butter in the trough, dug his hands in the tar up to his elbows. "Oh, the devil!" he exclaimed, quickly pulling his arms back and pushing the bucket back. "What now?" But the bucket, which had stood next to the hole, suddenly fell from the push into the hole onto the other robber's head. The robber screamed, quickly climbed out of the hole like a fool with sticky fluid all over him. "There's tar in the buckets," the first robber explained, who had inspected the buckets. "Ah, I hope the damned wizard will rot in tar in hell." Swearing, both left the drying house and looked around to clean themselves up. But the robber on whose head the bucket had fell was so soaked in tar that he had to take his coat off and carry it in hand if he did not want to leave it. "I will not forgive the wizard for that," he swore in anger, "and if I have to stay here tonight, I won't leave till I have stolen something from him." The other robber had the same thoughts, and they went into the stable intending to steal his horse, but the stable was empty because the horseboy had brought the horses to night watch. "Tonight we are unlucky," the robber talked and went to the granary. In one place they should find luck, but what will give it? As soon as the granary door opens, the bats poured out at them, scratching them by ears with their wings. "God, the granary is full of devils!" the robber screamed, seeing so many fiery eyes. "Help us, help us, help us!" And protecting their ears with their hands they ran how they could. The household master, who in the meantime had come to his senses and was now making his way to the house, ran out of the barn, and seeing two men running, took a stick and began to chase them. Not knowing where to go, in their insensibility, went to the drying house, then behind it, then to the bridge, but they did not go further, because the butter, which they took for golden wood, was soft, and they dug themselves in up to the waist. While the robbers were trying to get out of the god's gift, the household master had reached them with his stick, and began to help one after the other with as much strength as he had. At last the robbers climbed out of the other side of the ditch and ran away, not even thanking the household master. "So it was you who took me to the barn," he said. "You won't be thinking about jokes like those the second time. Those I have driven out of you. But look here, what have they left here? A coat, covered in tar? They would have tampered with my tar barrel." The master of the household had picked the coat up with his stick and threw them back into the ditch. While falling, something in the pocket of the coat made a sound. "Sounded like money," he said, crouched down and pulled a heavy wallet out of the pocket. Look, what honorable jokesters, they pay back for their mischief." He opened the wallet and found that it is full of golden money. Happily he puts the wallet into his pocket and rushes to the house to tell his wife. What luck had struck them! As soon as the wife heard him, she started screaming with all her voice, and did not stop as long as the fire was lit and the bull was taken back to the barn and all corners were searched. Only then she would listen to her husband's explanation, that it had not been robbers, nor ghosts, but innocent people who had played out jokes all over the house and paid handsomely for them, and then had left. He showed the money to his wife, put the window back, and they both went back to sleep. During the day, the household master, laughing, began the cleaning of the ruined butter, and the wife sang while cleaning and scrubbing the tarred buckets. But to the little devils, who had so much fun during the night because of the robbers' troubles, now were very irritated because of the master's joyfulness. They had wanted to harm the pious household master, and now he had been saved from the death and had gotten a large sum of money because of them. They could not leave it like that. The little devils had to think of something else, in which the household master would meet his end. All day they did not go anywhere. They just laid in the sun on the hay and thought all day. When evening came, they had come up with their own mischiefs for the night. "I will bewitch the master's horse, so it will drop anyone who sat on it," the first one said. "I heard his household's master's turn to ride to the night watch, so maybe he will break his neck from falling tonight." "And I will bewitch this house well," said the other. "Everyone who goes there for water will fall down and drown." And the devils did what they decided, and bewitched the horse and the well, and then hid. But the master of the household, out of happiness of becoming a rich man, did not ride to the night watch, and told to put grain in the horse's trough. Just the same, no one went for water that evening, because the water had been carried during the day. When, for some time waiting, the little devils saw that the master of the household was not coming, and the whole house went to sleep, they suddenly also wanted to go to sleep in the kitchen stove. Suddenly they saw a man coming through the gate into the yard. They recognized him immediately. It was one of the robbers from last night. "He's once more coming. This time he will kill the master of the household." They talked to each other and opened their eyes wide to see clearly what was about to happen. But the robber did not go to the house, but went into the stable, because he wanted to steal the master's horse. The other robber waited on the other side of the gate next to the well. He could not walk closer because he had to hold the horse they had already stolen that night. Soon the first came out of the stable with the horse and jumped on its back. But as soon as it happened, the horse began to kick, rising on the back legs, and began to jump around in the yard like crazy. The robber tried to restrain it, and he tried to calm it, but for nothing. The horse did not stop till the rider was thrown off, but while falling the robber broke his neck. On the other side of the gate the other robber waited and waited, at last got tired of standing and sat on the planks on the edges of the well. The horse, seeing the water, began to sniff at it. "You want to drink?" the robber said. "Here, I will draw some for you." He took the hook and the bucket which lay next to the well and drew some water from the well, but raising the full bucket his foot slipped, and he fell into the well head first and drowned. Now both the robbers were dead. "Fools!" scolded the little devils. "Could not kill the farmer, but knew how to find their own end. Whatever, Papa will be happy for them." They climbed into the kitchen stove and slept in the coal. When the mistress of the household came in the morning and lit a fire in front of them, with smoke they rose up from the chimney up to the roof, where they sat down, hiding to see what the master of the household would do. Seeing the dead robbers and the loose horse in the yard, he at once knew what kind of visitors lay there. He calmly took the horse to bring it back to the stable, but the horse began to hiss and roared, and stepped back. It stood up and acted like a bewitched animal would. "Oh," said the master, "I see what has happened to you. This man has bewitched you." He reached out at the upper door post of the stables and grabbed the rowan tree stick with 3 and 9 crosses and cast it over the horse's back 3 times. At once the horse stopped to rage, and the master of the household took it into the stable. The witchcraft had disappeared. "Now, friend, is your turn." The master of the household talked to the corpse, put it over his shoulder and carried him through the gate, wanting to bury him further away. But there he saw the other horse next to the well, and walking closer saw the legs in the well. "So there were 2 of you," he continued to talk, "probably friends and companions and last night's jokesters. Then sleep together in one place." And he threw the corpse into the well and called the boy, and both filled the well. But the horse he brought into the stable while laughing. When the little devils saw all of it, out of anger they rolled over and fell from the roof. They had put so much hope on the master of the household's troubles, and now it had all once again turned into his favor. But could they not do any more harm to him? Just wait, household master, the little devils will think of something again. They took oakum and filled their ears with it, so the songs of birds would not bother them, and went to the hay pile, and each sat at the opposite sides and thought and thought. Only late at night they climbed out of the pile. They had thought of a terrible mischief. Just behind the master's house his fields began, and they stretched far away. The devils had heard that the master of the household was very proud of his field, and had said, "There, so much wheat will grow." Because they thought that grass just grows and then turns into hay by itself, they had planned to cut down before it had turned into hay, and by doing so, destroying the hopes of the master of the household. They took 2 old brooms, which at once turned into sharp cutting tools, stood at the opposite sides of the field, and began to cut the greasy, juicy grass. The work was hard, but they were making fast progress, and when the sun began to rise, the field had been cut, and the grass laid in such beautiful rows like the best of reapers had cut it. But the devils, quite tired, dragged themselves back to the house. When the master of the household had woken up and saw the field, he clapped his hands out of happiness. "Wife," he shouted, "come look what has happened tonight. Our field has been cut. Thanks to the merciful Father in the sky, we would have to sweat for 2 weeks every morning, now everything has been cut." Hearing these words out of anger, the devils became white like overburnt iron. "Let's leave the master of the household be," the first one said. "Otherwise, he will become too happy and rich." "No," the other retorted. "Let's try one more time. Look, there the master of the household is driving a large herd of sheep to the field. We are going to turn into lambs and lure the whole herd into the swamp so they will drown." "Let us try one more time," the first devil said, and both went out of their hiding place, turned into lambs, and joined up with the master's herd. "Look, look," the master said, seeing the little devils. "Last night once again 2 little beautiful lambs jumped in. I've always wanted a black lamb to be in my barn. Now God has sent me 2. I am a happy man." When these words had already made them irritated, then what happened next would make them want to jump out of their lamb hides, if they could. See, along the road, next to which was the master of the household's pasture land, a beautiful carriage was driving by, and in it sat a beautiful princess. When the carriage was next to the sheep herd, she commanded that the carriage stop, and greeted the farmer, kindly nodding her hair. "I see that you have a couple of black lambs," the princess said. "They are so lovely, and are jumping around so cheerfully, that I would like to take them with me to the castle. Will you sell them to me?" "Gladly, merciful princess," the farmer said, holding his hat in hand. "How much you are asking for them?" The master of the household was no fool. He knew if noble people liked something very much, they would not hold back with money. 200 golden pieces, merciful princess." 200, the princess repeated. "Is it not too much? Why are you asking so much?" "Merciful princess, because these lambs are not like the rest. They are God sent," the master of the household explained. "Oh, I see," the princess said, satisfied. "That is a different matter," and she pulled out a silk money pouch and counted 200 golden pieces into his hand. After putting the money in the pocket, he now went to catch the lambs, but it was not as easy as he had thought, because the little devils who had heard everything did not want to yield for anything. They ran into the herd, hid in the bushes, ran under the carriage, and tired the master out completely. At last, he, without breath, went to the carriage and said that the lambs could not be captured, and the princess had to take her money back. But the princess, who was in tears from laughing at the commotion, did not do it. She threw in a few more golden pieces into the master of the household's hand, commanded the stable boy to tie up the horses, and to go help the master of the household. Then she also stepped out of the carriage, tucked up her skirt so it would not get dirty, and now all three of them were chasing the lambs and at last capturing them. The master of the household tied up their legs, put them into the carriage, and the princess drove off. Arriving at the castle, she commanded that the lambs be washed in aromatic waters and made 2 collars out of red silk. Every day the princess took the lambs for walks, gave them honey with bread to eat, and sweet milk to drink. Sometimes they were let in the garden, which had tall walls around them, to roam free. But life like this was not for the little devils. They were used to doing what they wanted, and now they had to calmly walk with a collar and stand in a little byre. You would ask, why did not they turn into mice and gnaw their way through the door, or turn into birds and fly over the high walls? Yes, they would have done it a long time ago, if they knew how to get off their lamb hides, but they did not know how. They had been lazy at studying in hell, and only knew how to turn into something, but how to turn back into devils they did not know yet. In their anger about the master of the household's luck, they had forgotten that they had to stay as lambs, if they wanted or not, and that is how they would have grown into mighty rams, if it was not for a lucky meeting with a wizard. See, when the princess had once more returned from her walk leading the lambs by her hand, there was a beggar sitting in the castle's gate asking for gifts. But this beggar was no one else than a wizard who had set his eyes on the princess, and now waited for a chance to get into the castle to kidnap the princess. While the princess was looking in her pockets for small change, the wizard looked at the little devils, and then in astonishment called out in their language of the devils, because in his eyes they were devils and not lambs. "Where have you come from?" he asked. "What has you nippers let out of hell? And what are you doing here?" Now the little devils also looked at the beggar, and grasped that he was a wizard, who they had seen many times among their mother's birthday wishers. This wizard was very delicate and wore, like all true Latvian artists, 3 last names. See, he was bewitching under the name Brudul Bugi a buffoon. Brudul he had inherited. Bugi had been gifted by friends, and a buffoon he had cheaply bought in Kurzem. "Oh, dear wizard," both of the little devils at once began to cry out, "it has turned out very bad for us," and they quickly told about their adventures, and how they had turned themselves into lambs, and begged the wizard to help them turn back into devils. "I can help, but nothing is given or done for free. Promise me that you will grant me my wish, then I will teach you to turn back." The devils happily promised to do anything that the wizard asked. "See," he said, "I want your princess as my wife, but I cannot get to her. I cannot take her by force, and I have not struck luck by deceit yet. That is why you must help me. See, the princess has a beautiful seat of honor in which she sits, welcoming her suitors. At the back of the chair, right where the back of her head sits, is a rusted nail. As soon as she pushes back her head against the nail, she at once sees who is standing in front of her. Is he truly a young, beautiful prince, or someone who has only taken his appearance? That is how she already has distinguished a lot of great wizards, and has sent them off in shame. I hope it does not happen to me. That is why you have to pull out the nail and put it in the dirt, and replace it with a different one, which I will drop as soon as the princess is not looking. In the morning I will be coming to marry. She will take me for a beautiful prince, and then I will be lucky to take her away." The little devils once more promised to grant the wizard's wishes, and then he told them where the seat of honor was, how to get to it, and dropped the nail onto the ground, and taught the little devils how to get off their lamb hides. In the meantime, the princess had found the gift and handed it to the wizard, and calmly led her lambs into the castle. She had heard the wizard speaking, but not knowing devil language, she thought that the beggar was saying a prayer in Latin. The talking of the little devils sounded like bleating to her, and that is why she immediately commanded to give the lambs honey and bread, because she thought that the lambs were bleating out of hunger. When the night came, both the lambs turned into devils, and they did not what to do out of happiness. They were jumping all around the byre, threw the throw around and jumped out of the window into the garden. There they ran for a while, and then sneaked into the biggest room of the castle, where the princess's seat of honor was. Only now they remembered about the wizard's nail. Where had it gone? Yes, not one of them knew where it was. In the scuffle the nail had vanished. What now? The first of the little devils exclaimed worriedly. Not good. Now we can't pull the nail out of the seat. What do we put in its place? Well, let it stay there, the second one answered. But then she will recognize the wizard. Let her recognize him. He's no fit for our princess. From his ugly mug even I get scared. But we promised to help him, the first one said. Even less of a reason for us devils to keep our promise, the second answered. We were unlucky getting the farmer into the mess. Now let's prank the wizard. Let's hide somewhere here and see what happens. This advice was well liked, and both of the jokesters hid behind a huge wrinkled silk blind. The next morning the whole yard trembled when the wizard with his company arrived. Soon after, all of the castle people arrived in a large hall, and the princess sat in the seat of honor, commanding that the prince be brought in. What a beautiful and delicate prince, the castle people whispered to one another. But the princess pressed her head against the nail. She exclaimed. What are these disgusting jokes once again? In front of me stands the ugliest wizard I have ever seen, and his companions are old broom handles with cabbage instead of their heads. Kick them out. And taken over with anger, she threw a golden apple which was in her hand against the wizard's head and knocked out his eye. The wizard screamed in pain and anger, and seeing himself so deceived by the little devils, he promised revenge, and to tell the devil about their actions. He kicked the ground 3 times and went straight to hell, leaving crossed broom handles in front of the princess. The devil was very angry that the little devils had escaped from hell and had done so much mischief. He asked the wizard why he had not captured them, and had not brought them back to hell. I wanted to, the wizard lied, but they escaped. For a long time I have thought that you are too old for the world, the devil angrily said. But now that you are one-eyed, you have no value. Your path is at its end. You have to stay in hell. Saying that, he kicked the wizard and went through the straightest path to the world to capture his children and bring back them into the hell. Our pranksters in the meantime had fled the castle and had run into the forest, which was greening next to the garden. At first they had been very happy about the wizard's mishap, but now they were overcome by fear. The wizard had gone to hell, and the devil probably knew about their sins. How to escape the upcoming punishment? Where to hide from the devil's anger? What could they do to hide their footprints and escape from being brought back to hell, which they did not like anymore? Oh, the devil himself could not be deceived by any magic. Soon he will be here, and then hardship will start. I can already feel our grandmother's fiery trident jumping on my back, the first little devil said sadly. Yes, my back is already getting hot, the second replied, and then both jumped into the nearby river to cool down. The river was swift, and fighting with sad thoughts, they let the river carry them forward and forward. They did not even notice that they were approaching an old lady who was sitting next to the river and seemed to be waiting for something. When the little devils at last were close enough that the old lady could reach them, she stretched her arm out and quickly pulled them out of the river and put them into her apron. Look too, she said to herself, and rushed to the bathhouse which smoked nearby. What were you doing outside for so long? The mistress asked, when the old lady went into the bathhouse. sleeping in the smoke I have turned ill. Nothing, nothing, mistress, the old lady comforted her. Hot with heating, good with waiting. You wanted for me to find you a heir, but what do you think I had the luck to catch? Two. They are kind of black, but full of energy. Just wait, I will wash them white. The old lady made water with different herbs, which she had dried between the pages of her books. She then drew some signs over them and plunged them into the water. Father all merciful, how they started to scream, because the water from her herbs and signs had turned strong, and it burned them like hellfire would burn their souls. She was confused, and became helpless like a little child. But the old woman did not listen to their screams, and scrubbed them one after the other, and they truly became twice as white as they had been before. The woman now wrapped them up in delicate clothing and went back to the house with the mistress. The old lady carried the little devils, because the mistress, as we know, had fallen a little bit ill in the bathhouse. Hearing that the old lady was carrying two lords, the master did not know what to do out of joy. The old lady made a cradle, she put a pillow in it, and also some of her herbs, a bedsheet, and also some herbs, covered with a silk cover, and more herbs. When the cradle was hanged, she enveloped it with ornaments, which were decorated by the mistress. On them were little angels. Even more, she drew many signs over them, at the right side, at the left side, at the foot of the bed, and at the head of the bed, to keep nightmares, spirits, and devils out. Tired from the pain and screaming, the little devils went quiet at last and fell asleep. But a lot of time did not pass when they woke up and began screaming once more. How could they not scream when the devil himself had come upon their tracks and stood next to their cradle, feeling it, trying to capture his children? But the many signs against evil spirits, nightmares, and devils were jabbing in him like sharp knives, and the ornaments burned like the hottest fire. Because of it, the devil became very angry and was threatening them with the hardest of punishments, if they did not climb out of the cradle and come with him. But they did not climb out, nor answered him, but only screamed and screamed. So you want to stay with the humans? The devil at last exclaimed, and pulled back his burnt hands, because he saw that all of his efforts were nothing. Good, stay with the humans, but then enjoy the punishment on having their faith and becoming just like them. I will erase you from our book. Good for you, if we meet in hell once more. Pushing these words out, the devil went back to hell, where with the help of an ink rubber and a pocket knife, he erased our little hero names from his book. At that exact moment they turned into humans, losing all of their devilish properties and completely losing any memories of hell. They calmed down and fell asleep. The old lady, who had been worried about the children being sick, after a moment began to feel relief, and pulled back the ornaments. Looking at the children, she affirmed that one was completely like the mistress, and one was like the master. Certainly the old woman lied, and no one knew it better than herself, but she had a weird habit of saying the children were like someone based on the way they slept, because after words like these she had never been left empty-handed, and again she was not disappointed. The master even bought her a bottle of wine, which she drank while wishing the little master's good nature, long life, joy, and health. Maybe the old lady's words, maybe the wine and her words put together were so strong, and no matter what, they turned out to be true. Our little heroes turned healthy, grew big, created much joy, and were such honest men that their souls, after a long life, went not into hell, but where jubilance never ends.